Poor woman, she's almost out of her mind.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my channel if this is your first time. This is part 6 of the Twilight Zone revisit, analysis, deep dive, whatever. And it's actually the end of the first series, the end of the first season. So I think it's really cool that we've got to this point, at this juncture. And it's a nice batch of episodes, actually. So just a bit of context, in case you haven't been watching the others, I'm looking at every single episode of the original Twilight Zone series. So all 156 episodes. And I'm doing them in batches of 6. So we'll end up with 26 episodes by the end of it. And this is part 6. So this is the last 6 episodes of season 1. And some really, really good episodes here. And it's interesting because the last episode, which we'll get to right at the end, has got quite a neat little trick in it, which is a nice way to end the series. So the first one is called The Chaser. Okay, so The Chaser starts with this opening narration. Mr. Roger Shackleford, age youthful 20s, occupation being in love. Not just in love, but madly, passionately, illogically, miserably, all-consumingly in love, with a young woman named Layla, who has a vague recollection of his face and even less than a passing interest. In a moment, you'll see a switch, because Mr. Roger Shackleford, the young gentleman so much in love, will take a short but meaningful journey into the Twilight Zone. So The Chaser is written by Robert Presnell Jr., and is based on a short story by John Collier, which is unusual. So there's a sort of a key team that are writing these episodes up to now, and Rod Serling is doing most of the legwork with a few other writers that keep coming up. But this is the first time that Robert Presnell Jr. has come up, and I think it's a really good story. It's not one of the best, but it's a good story. It's basically a love potion story. So there's a character called Roger who is deeply in love with this woman who absolutely doesn't give a toss about him. And he goes to see, someone advises him to go to see this man. And basically this man gives him a love potion. And Roger uses that love potion, and then it kind of goes from there. And it's got a much lighter tone. It's kind of... it's not funny, but it's definitely a bit amusing, and it's a bit of fun. And there's a really cool jazz score in it as well, which I really enjoyed. So the score was really cool. One of the nice things as well is that the object of his affection was played by Patricia Barry, and she does another appearance in the Twilight Zone in the Twilight Zone movie. So she's in Joe Dante's adaptation of It's a Good Life, and she plays the mother. So that's pretty cool, because the father's played by Kevin McCarthy, who, if you've seen the other videos, you'll notice that he appeared in Long Live Walter Jameson. So it's pretty cool that Patricia Barry was in this. She was fantastic in this episode as well, and it all made perfect sense visually as well, the whole plot, which was really cool. The way that they worked together was really good, and the way that she changes after the love potion is really cool. Yeah, there's a really nice element of tension at the end when Roger's got the chaser, which is the antidote, if you like, to this love potion in his hand, and like the way that the action is happening on screen, you can't tell if he's gonna manage to get it to her or not, and that kind of thing, and that's really done well. So yeah, it's a bit of fun, and it's a good way to start this little batch of 6. The next episode is A Passage for Trumpet, which is absolutely one of the best episodes. And A Passage for Trumpet starts with this opening narration. Joey Crown, musician with an odd, intense face, whose life is a quest for impossible things like flowers in concrete, or like trying to pluck a note of music out of the air and put it under glass to treasure. Joey Crown, musician with an odd, intense face, who in a moment will try to leave the earth and discover the middle ground, the place we call the Twilight Zone. So this is written by Rod Serling, And I think you can tell that a lot of the ones that are written by Rod Serling has got this real heart to it. It's got a bit of a sentimentality to it. It's got a lot of human emotion in it, like explorations on human nature. And yeah, some of the more sensitive episodes are written by Rod Serling. This has got a fantastic central performance from Jack Klugman. So Jack Klugman has been in a few episodes of The Twilight Zone, and he appears 4 times, and the only other person to appear 4 times is Burgess Meredith. So yeah, he does a few appearances, and Jack Klugman's really good. You guys might know him as well from being Quincy in the 80s series, the crime series where he played the Doctor. But yeah, he's fantastic in this episode. Really subtle performance, and he plays a trumpeter, jazz trumpeter, who's basically got an alcohol problem, and he's a bit washed up. He's lost his will to sort of push himself, and it's kind of like it's a Wonderful Life kind of situation with a guardian angel trying to tell him about the value of life. That's played really well, actually. The guardian angel's got its real presence. He's not even in it for very long, but he's got real presence, and it's got that kind of message to it. But it's done so well by Jack Klugman, who's kind of carrying the episode. So yeah, that's a really, really cool aspect of it. And Jack Klugman was taught by a professional trumpeter as well to get the fingering right, so it looked really realistic. And I think that's pretty cool little fact about the episode as well. But it's ultimately a story about hope, and there's a really lovely ending. There's a kind of the main story that involves the guardian angel, and then there's like an epilogue moment in the episode, and that epilogue moment is really quite lovely. So yeah, it's got a really nice conclusion, and there's a little and ultimately hope lies in a beautiful woman that he meets after he's sorted himself out. So there's sort of hope for the future for him, which is really cool. So yeah, really lovely episode. One of the best episodes, I think, of all of the Twilight Zones. Really down to this fantastic performance from Jack Klugman. So the third episode is a really interesting one called Mr. Bevis. Okay, Mr. Bevis starts with this opening narration. In the parlance of the 20th century, this is an oddball. His name is James B.W. Bevis, and his tastes lean towards stuffed animals, zither music, professional football, Charles Dickens, moose heads, carnivals, dogs, children, and young ladies. Mr. Bevis is accident-prone, a little vague, a little discombobulated, with a life that possesses all the security of a floating crap game. But this can be said of our Mr. Bevis. Without him, without his warmth, without his kindness, the world would be a considerably poorer place, albeit perhaps a little saner. Should it not be obvious by now, James B.W. Bevis is a fixture in his own private, optimistic, hopeful little world, a world which has long ceased being surprised by him. James B.W. Bevis, on whom Dame Fortune will shortly turn her back, but not before she gives him a paste in the mouth. Mr. James B.W. Bevis, just a block away from the Twilight Zone. So Mr. Bevis is an episode written by Rod Serling, and it was initially intended for Burgess Meredith, actually, and he offered it to him, but he offered it to him as a pilot for a series which would be all about this character, Mr. Bevis, played by Burgess Meredith, who would be kind of accident-prone and a little bit odd and eccentric, but he had this guardian angel to protect him again. So it's another guardian angel story, which is interesting because it's straight after this other one. But it was intended for Burgess Meredith at first, but he declined, I think is a better way of saying it, declined the offer. So in the end, Rod Serling cast Orson Bean in the role. And it's really funny because when I was watching it, I was thinking, I know that face. And I looked up his name. I thought, I know that name, Orson Bean. What's Orson Bean been in? And he was quite famous at the time. He had his own chat show, and he did comedy, and he did lots of different roles that were stuff I didn't know about. But what I did know about is something he did a lot more recently, and that is that he plays the guy who owns the company in Being John Malkovich. So Being John Malkovich is one of my favourite films. I love it to pieces. and he's the guy that does the interview, where he's like he keeps saying, "Are you banging my secretary?" to John Cusack, and he's just and he's ultimately one of the main characters in the film. This old guy. Clearly, he's not old at this point, but that's like 40 years after this episode, and yeah, it's a really good performance from him. It kind of I was thinking about how would I describe this performance, because I knew I was going to do this video, obviously, and at first it seems like a little bit of a cross between Stan Laurel and Steve Martin. By the end of the episode, you've got this sense of Orson Bean's own characterization and his own kind of take on this kind of character, and his character is kind of eccentric, a bit of a loser, but actually he's not. I think one of the really cool messages in the episode, actually, because you said loser, but he loses his job and he can't sustain a relationship, and he's seen as a loser by his manager and actually by the guardian angel that's with him. But he says that the things that make him happy are not the things that the guardian angel is trying to fix, and it's such a cool message. Because it's like, actually, some people just need to let their freak flag fly, to quote David Crosby. And that's kind of like the message of the episode, which is really cool. So I think it's a really good message in a really good episode, with a fantastic performance from Orson Bean as Mr. Bevis. Although one of the things that I thought was a bit strange, it was just something I noticed when I was watching it, that there's the Foley sound of like a car exhaust at one point when he's driving off, and it actually is louder than Rod Serling's closing narration, and you don't hear everything he says, which is really weird. Why would you do that? So it's a really cool line that is a bit disguised by the sound of the car exhaust. So yeah, that's a little bit of an interesting thing about the way they mixed the sound. Okay, so the next episode is the After Hours. And the After Hours begins with this opening narration. Express elevated to the 9th floor of a department store, carrying Miss Marcia White on a most prosaic, ordinary, run-of-the-mill errand. Miss Marcia White on the 9th floor, specialty department, looking for a gold thimble. The odds are that she'll find it. There are even better odds that she'll find something else. Because this isn't just a department store. This happens to be the Twilight Zone. This is a stunning episode. It's an absolutely incredible episode, and it's written by Rod Serling again, but it's a real slow build, and it's got this fantastic performance at the center of it, that Anne Francis is playing this woman in this department store, and she's basically after this thimble. She goes up to either the 9th or the 12th floor, I can't remember which floor it is, but she goes up to this floor and she's after this thimble, and she sees this woman, and the only thing in the entire floor is this woman selling this one thimble, and she says this is a bit weird, but anyway, it all makes sense by the end of it, because she carries on, she's wandering around the department store and she's interacting with other characters, and then eventually she goes back to that floor, and then she discovers the reason why some of the stuff that's been happening in this department store doesn't make sense to her is that she's actually a mannequin. And the moment before she finds that out and she's trapped on this floor and everything's been really weird to her, Anne Francis does this incredible performance where she breaks down, and it's really dramatic, but in a really realistic and compelling way. It's such a good performance. And it's that sort of like, there's a sort of an element where she's frightened, but she's also confused. She's breaking down. She's lost control of her emotions, and it's all wrapped up in this moment where she's kind of like, she sort of falls against a wall, and it's just fantastic. And it's a really, really strong performance. As is so often the case with this show, the performances are amazing. And it's kind of a horror story, this one. So sometimes they do these science fiction stories, sometimes it's like fantasy stories, sometimes it's just a bit weird. This is definitely a horror story because it's got this really chilling moment. And then after that, there's like this whimsical kind of light epilogue at the end, where the manager of the store notices the mannequins, and yeah, it's a really interesting, eerie, disturbing episode that is definitely one of the best. So the After Hours is a really, really interesting episode. Then the 5th episode in this little batch is The Mighty Casey, another episode written by Rod Serling. Okay, The Mighty Casey opens with this narration. What you're looking at is a ghost, once alive but now deceased. Once upon a time, it was a baseball stadium that housed a major league ball club known as the Hoboken Zephyrs. Now it houses nothing but memories and a wind that stirs in the high grass of what was once an outfield, a wind that sometimes bears a faint ghostly resemblance to the roar of a crowd that once sat here. We're back in time now when the Hoboken Zephyrs were still a part of the National League, and this mausoleum of memories was an honest-to-Pete stadium. But since this is strictly a story of make-believe, it has to start this way. Once upon a time in Hoboken, New Jersey, it was tryout day, and though he's not yet on the field, you're about to meet a most unusual fella, a left-handed pitcher named Casey. So this is about a failing baseball team who are coached by Jack Warden, and Jack Warden has already appeared in the Twilight Zone. So he appeared in the episode called The Lonely, I think it's called, which has already happened. So that was in a previous video, and that was a really cool episode. But yeah, this is his second appearance in the Twilight Zone. And apparently he wasn't the first one to be cast in this role, and it all went a bit wrong. So they had to re-film those scenes with that character in it, with Jack Warden playing them, which is kind of interesting. And there was sort of budget issues, and it was all a little bit hectic for the Twilight Zone crew. But anyway, The Mighty Casey is ultimately about the fact that this failing baseball team managed to overcome their consistent failures by employing a robot. So this robot called Casey looks humanoid, tricks everybody. Nobody is aware that he's a robot, but it comes out that he is. And then the trouble with this robot is that he doesn't have a heart. And that becomes a plot point. This robot doesn't have a heart. It's fantastic. It's a really good episode, and definitely it's a much lighter episode again. So there's lots of light and shade in this little batch, and this is definitely a lighter episode as well. I'd say actually out of these 6 episodes, most of them have got this sort of light energy to them. But yeah, it's a very endearing episode, very enjoyable, and a good performance from Jack Warden in the middle of it. So the last one, and again one of my favorite episodes, really, really strong, brilliant episode, is A World of His Own. And A World of His Own starts with this opening narration. The home of Mr. Gregory West, one of America's most noted playwrights. The office of Mr. Gregory West. Mr. Gregory West, shy, quiet, and at the moment very happy. Mary, warm and affectionate. And the final ingredient, Mrs. Gregory West. So A World of His Own is written by Richard Matheson. So Rich Matheson wrote a lot of my favourite episodes, and he is someone I've mentioned a lot on this channel. He's one of my favourite authors, my joint favourite author, if you like. And yes, this is a cracking episode where what seems to be a domestic issue with him seemingly talking to a mistress, and then his wife turns up, becomes something a little bit more interesting and fantastical, because basically he is an author whose characters come to life, and he can basically make them disappear by destroying the tape that he used to create them on his dictaphone. So the character comes to life through him talking on the dictaphone, and then if he snips off the tape that created that and then throws it in the fire, the character disappears and he's been uncreated, or he or she has been uncreated. And that becomes the crux of this episode, and ultimately it's like a big argument between him and his wife. His wife doesn't believe him. His wife is played brilliantly. Really, really interesting actress. Both of them are bouncing off each other. There's a real chemistry, I think, in this episode, and I think it's a really good testament to their performances, this episode. And the principal character, he's played by Keenan Wynn. And Keenan Wynn is the son of Ed Wynn. So Ed Wynn was the fantastic actor in One for the Angels, which is one of the best episodes. And Ed Wynn is just famous for like Mary Poppins and all sorts of things. But Keenan Wynn is his son, and he plays the main character in this. And it's just got a fantastic conclusion. And a neat little trick they do as well, which is a nice way to finish the season, the first ever season of Twilight Zone. And clearly, this is probably them enjoying themselves after their success, because at this point, the Twilight Zone is definitely a success. You've got the character interacting with his wife most of the time. And then right at the end, Rod Serling is on screen for the first time in the scene itself. So this carries on through the rest of the series. But at this point, it's the first time Rod Serling has appeared at the end to do his closing narration. And then he gets interrupted by the main character, who then takes out an envelope with Rod Serling's tape on it, and he throws Rod Serling's tape into the fire, and Rod Serling disappears, which is awesome. It's a lovely joke, and it shows this sort of sense of humour that Rod Serling's got. And yeah, it's just a great end to the season. So yeah, that's the first season done. It's a really strong season, and sets up this incredible series. And it does have a lot of the most accomplished and famous and brilliant episodes in that first season. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Next one you watch will be the second season. And from the second season onwards, you get that classic moment where Rod Serling appears at the end to do his closing narration on screen, which I think is one of the awesome things about Twilight Zone. But anyway, that'll be for the next video. Thanks a lot for watching. Stay curious, everybody. Thanks.
Picture of what it's like to